Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Market Strategy for Parabolas. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, my guest is Rob Miller. He has exemplary experience in the government space from his time working on Capitol Hill, in the U.S. intelligence community, in the White House Situation Room, and firsthand with venture-backed startups. His experience lends a wealth of knowledge to government contractors in successfully navigating the industry. And his book, Startup Statesmanship, is a lot of what we'll be diving into today, and you can find this on Amazon. Welcome to the show, Rob. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Teresa. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. You come highly recommended by our friends at OXO. And so I couldn't wait to have you on the show. I trust them immensely. So this is going to be great for our audience. And so I'm excited. But before we get started, if you could please take us through your journey, both professionally and personally a little, if you'd like, and share with us a bit about what the road to today has looked like for you.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the sort of major milestones. I attended university in Colorado and joined the Peace Corps after a senior thesis advisor sort of nudged me in that direction. He and I are actually, in fact, still friends today. So it was a very good decision to do that. Peace Corps led me naturally to Capitol Hill. Peace Corps volunteers typically are very political. I knew nothing at the time and thought I really need to get smart on this stuff. And so I spent 3.5 years on Capitol Hill working for a member from South Florida that had a lot of Haitians in his district. I lived in Haiti as a Peace Corps volunteer. But I knew deep down I always wanted to be an intelligence officer. It's what I had wanted to do since I was a little kid, reading Tom Clancy books and seeing the movies. And so I needed a buffer, 5 years between Peace Corps and Intel. So I did 3 years and some change on the Hill, and then 2 years in graduate school before going into the IC. And that was a wonderful experience. I got to do a lot of different things in a lot of different places around the world. You can see some of the pictures behind me on what I call my vanity wall. So I spent some time downrange in Afghanistan, visited Ukraine before it was cool. And that actually then exposed me to startups through my work that I was doing over at CIA, trying to understand how industry was going to impact our mission. And so I ended up writing a couple papers that took me out to industry engagements, interacting with the QUIC, which is the In-Q-Tel Interface Center that sits inside of the various departments and agencies representing In-Q-Tel, and really caught the bug. And so one day a job opportunity that a friend was pursuing popped up. And he's like, dude, would you go work for these guys? And I was like, man, I would work there in a heartbeat. And without even realizing, I just convinced myself I needed to quit my government career and go work in a startup. And it was that easy. And so I ended up reaching out to that same company who was looking for a Fed salesperson. Obviously, I knew the Fed side pretty well. And they moved very quickly, brought me on board as their head of federal sales. This was Hawkeye 360. I worked there for 2 years leading Fed sales, and then ultimately was poached by a computer vision company. And having been a geo-inter, so looking at satellite imagery and full motion video as a professional intelligence officer, going into a computer vision company made a lot of sense in terms of mission, the things I cared about, the people I knew, the network that I had. And so they poached me very easily. And I spent 4 years as their head of sales and just loved every minute of it. And then, 2023, we were acquired. So, a nice exit in everybody's, job jar, if you will. And it was that acquisition, though, that brought me to where I am today, working for an FFRDC, or a federally funded research and development center. And I basically get to take all of those things I've learned over the last 20 years and apply them to my job today.
That's amazing. And that's why you're here today, because it's all about taking your experience and helping people with it. And that's what we try to do with this show, which is exactly why I immediately was attracted to having you on here, because there are a lot of people from different backgrounds listening to you, a lot of which, are people who are just starting out that are looking for that navigation tool to help them get started and get moving. And then there are others who have been around for a long time, and they're just looking to see what they didn't already know that can help them navigate even further. And so, your book is a centerpiece of what we want to focus on today. So Everyone that's watching this can see the link to the book on Amazon. I encourage you to go on Amazon if you're just listening to us. The title of the book is Startup Statesmanship, and you definitely won't go wrong with grabbing that. But part of the things with your background that you focused on was that startup piece. And so if you wouldn't mind going into a little detail about what you see as the biggest hurdle that new contractors face when they're entering into the marketplace.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty common, and it's not just small businesses. I think anybody that's thinking about going into federal sales ultimately suffers from the same, I hate to say, myopathy. They don't necessarily appreciate the time, energy, and resources necessary to achieve success. And we in the sales side of the house will typically talk about the 18 to 36 month time frame to break into government. And we're all sort of slaves to our own biases, and CEOs who are perpetual optimists or founders who are perpetual optimists will hear, great, 18 months, fat contract, go do that. And it's like, that's not what I said. 18 to 36 months to get your foot in the door. And then it's going to take years on top of that in order to find that real, product market fit and find that transition partner, find the budget line, and all of those other things that have to happen. It takes a lot. And people, I don't know, I think, hope springs eternal, but I think there's also this conflict between, what sales teams are messaging up and what VCs are messaging down, and founders and CEOs and boards are sort of caught in the middle of trying to reconcile these things, and oftentimes having to err on the side of, we're going to land that deal in order to get to that next round. And it can create some friction for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you are definitely speaking a language that we've touched on in recent episodes, dealing with the fact that not only do you have to focus on those months and years before the real concrete wins help you get through and into the industry, but it's really deciphering if what you're doing is really of need. I think a lot of people who are trying to advise and educate the newest of contractors, they don't really face that. And to your point, it's because entrepreneurs and business owners are innately positive and leaning into an opportunity that seems evergreen. Doesn't mean it's going to be evergreen for everyone, because if it was easy, everyone would do it. You take whatever you're doing in the commercial market and transfer it over into the government contracting market, because the opportunities are endless. And so I think, the patience aspect of it isn't really talked about a lot, because people believe through relationships or proficiencies or certifications that they're going to jump in and hit the ground running. And that's not really where the rubber meets the road. It's really figuring out how to navigate it while also doing something else to stand up your, financial background personally and professionally to get through those humps. And so we advise a lot on that as well. It's like, it's one thing to get into it and know that it's going to take you a long time, but what are you going to be doing to be profitable along that period as well, so that you're not dumping all your money into an effort that might take you several years to really be on track. And so I love the fact that patience aspect of it is what you lead with, because I think a lot of people don't understand what that really entails, that it doesn't just turn over, in 24 hours, and things that tend to lead into the biggest success take time. And so you've got to be patient with that process. So that's great advice. Getting a little bit more nitty gritty on that, what are 2 to 3 prerequisites that new contractors need before they can get started to really lean into that opportunity?
Yeah, I think the first one is sort of obvious, I suppose, which is sam.gov. You have to register. You have to have a unique entity identifier number, or UEI. Those go on every proposal, on every contract. So if you don't have one, you're dead in the water. So that is your foremost prerequisite for government contracting. I think after that, it starts to get a little more nebulous. And I think it's actually part of the beauty of federal contracting is that there is no one way to skin a cat. You can win multiple pathways. But I think one of the things that you can do to help yourself along that pathway is to hire somebody who has expertise in the market you're trying to penetrate. So if you're trying to sell to U.S. Special Operations Command, hire a former acquisitions officer from there, hire somebody who was an operator, or hire somebody who has years of experience selling to them. And fundamentally, that's because these groups are essentially microcosms of the world, and so they have their own language, their own history, their own culture, and if you don't speak those, you're going to be seen as an other. You're going to go in and you're going to make outrageous claims that everybody's going to be like, that is not how this works. And I saw it plenty of times in my startup experience where, people who extremely intelligent had sort of glided through life just winging it because they knew they were going to be smarter than most of the people they were going to talk to, just falling flat in that first meeting with an intelligence community partner because their only point of reference was movies and TV, which gave them no true bearing about how these things actually operate. And so having somebody there to sort of pull on an elbow and saying, not exactly what that means, very valuable to have. And especially when it comes time to, doing that outreach, writing your sales collateral, and then I think most importantly, writing your proposals, because what people fail to recognize is that proposals are written against requirements. And if you're not speaking the same language, the contracting officer is not going to understand how to interpret it. And so you need to write in the language of the organization that you're proposing to, so they can say, 1-to-1, 1-to-1, 1-to-1. I got it. This lines up perfectly. Here's an award. And I'll just say the way you do that, of course, is by reading trade magazines, going to conferences, attending trade shows, whatever it might be, and hearing how people talk about their business, how they talk about their problems, and using that in your own writing. And I found when I was working for an AI company, we only wanted to talk using AI terms, industry terms, and those did not translate well into the intelligence community. We would use words like predictions when and the community would say analysis, and those two things didn't really reconcile because of the inherent probabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And so we had to find a way to sort of bridge that gap. And thankfully, we were able to do that through a trade organization that wrote basically a translator between industry and government, which is usgif.org if anybody's interested for AI.
Oh, that's a great resource. I appreciate that. I think you've hit the nail on the head on all of your recommendations, but especially with the finding that industry expertise and leading with that. I think all too often business owners tend to be functional operators more than they are experts in government contracting. And to your point as well, each industry within the federal government functions a certain way, and then the actual agencies themselves do things a certain way. I know when I broke into the federal marketplace, I was going, as a fly on the wall to a lot of industry days so that I could hear the buzzwords that were being used so that I didn't stand out like a sore thumb when I was trying to talk to people about opportunities. And I think all too often business owners will lean into, I need to save some money, so I'm going to lead it because I know what we do better than anyone else can. And so I can speak to that. But it's the coupling of what you do with the mission readiness of what you're doing for the people that you're talking to. And if the two can't collide in a beautiful way, then you're still not going to have access to the opportunities that you need. Even if the contracting officer loves you, they can't spend all of their time trying to teach you the things that they need in order to translate that internally into their opportunity. And so we've heard things similar to that before, but the way that you broke it down was perfect, because sometimes the outsourcing of things, like you said, are important. It isn't so much the saving of the buck and doing everything yourself, but it's making yourself not to be the single point of failure for your company because you try to hold on too long to doing everything yourself when you could have outsourced to someone else who has far more expertise and can narrow that timeline of winning an award that actually gets you in the door, that can help with future opportunities. So I think that those are really amazing, advice points for people that are listening today, not just people who are starting up, but people who have had long-term issue with having consistency in their award wins. I think you'll see that gap. You might win it because of a relationship, but the longevity of that might not be there because you still don't know what the people you're trying to have a relationship with is truly looking for. So that's great information. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think you really hit it on the head. I advise people that their first sales hire should actually be in marketing, not in a salesperson. and that, but I don't know I've ever met anybody who's actually listened to my advice on that. But it's for the points that you just raised exactly. You might be able to hire somebody who can kick and scream their way to, $2 to $5 million, but it won't be repeatable. It won't be transparent. It won't be scalable. And without understanding your market, its segments, its players, its needs, you're never going to find that trajectory that your board and you and your investors want. And so you really have to take a sort of more holistic approach, and it can't be just go do sales, go.
Right. Because if you don't have the ability to do that market research and to understand things, differently across the board. I love that you said that because, of course, my background being in market strategy. So kudos to recognizing us in that environment. I love that. But not to make this about me, of course. I love some of the anecdotes that you share in your book. And we chatted about this in planning for this episode. I'd love for you to dig in a little deep on some current examples that you're seeing with regard, and I know that this is going in deep on a topic that you've said yourself is a lot to unpack, but share some current examples of how important it is to understanding the federal budget and how small businesses can make an impact. And I know there's a lot there. We talk about it all the time at Parabolas about really understanding what the budget means, where it's being allocated, how it's being allocated, different missions that are within that budget. And it's a lot. And it's a lot of my time being spent on really looking at what agencies are getting, how they're allocating that money, what they've done historically with that. And I don't think a lot of small business owners really understand the impact of that. So if you wouldn't mind, digging in the past maybe 5 years to now, what is it that they should be looking to understand first and foremost about the budget itself, and then how are they able to actually make an impact as a small business? Because a lot of people show up at conferences, for example, and they're like, I'm facing this hurdle. What are you going to do about it? And it's like, push back on that. Well, what are you as a business owner going to do about it?
Yeah, and in fact, there is a lot to unpack, and there's multiple ways to sort of go about looking at this. Number one, from the side of Congress, other side from like OMB, from the president's budget request, and then of course for the individual components within the executive branch who are making those requirements up to the PBR through OMB. And I guess like the first thing to understand is that we're, new administration, new Congress, new House and Senate. And so there's a lot of transition going on right now. Dell Tech recently posted a webinar that anybody can sign up for that just talks about what those changes are that people are seeing through signaling and through changes that are being made. I think that's a valuable place to start, just to try to understand like where the major pots of money are being repositioned. And then for a small business, how they can impact the budget, really can come two ways. Like number one, you're going through the traditional transformation process within, an executive branch department or agency. And this is a very long play, right? Notably, if you're a startup, you've got an innovative process or capability, you are likely 2 years out of step with the requirements process. That is a little convoluted, but basically, in February of 2025, people are planning for 2027 right now.
Right.
And so that sort of like separation should give people pause to think about, wow, if I've got something no one's ever purchased before in the government, there's no requirement today to buy that thing. And so there's going to be some impact there. You're left to discretionary budgets, $1 million, $2 million max, probably. And that process of, getting in that early R&D, going through, test and evaluation, independent verification and validation, authority to operate, all of those things in order to get your capability out into the enterprise can take years. And that sort of like tracks with what we've been saying. But there are ways to sort of sidestep that. And I mentioned Congress early on, and this doesn't happen overnight either, but
Right.
I guess the point is, though, that these are co-equal branches of government, executive and legislative. You can't ignore one for the other. And so if you are a small business operating anywhere in the nation, you should go meet your member of Congress, go meet your senator or their staff, talk about what you're doing and the impact on the nation's national security, its health, its food supply, whatever it might be that you're doing, to make sure that they're aware of it. And then over time, build that relationship so that when there is an opportunity to put in an appropriations request, you've got a team who's ready to support you, advocate for you, champion for you. And on the other side of the house, you have a team that's willing to do those same things, but on the authorization side. And so you need matching language on those two bills. And that takes time to build that trust. And you can't just, like I said, focus on the executive sales side.
Right.
Some money has to be put into overhead to go spend time up on Capitol Hill, maybe even putting some money into, campaign stuff, go buy, plate at a dinner. Those are things that people tend not to think about. Maybe they don't want to think about it. They don't want their name released publicly through donation records, but you go look, people do it all the time. Donald Trump talks about how he donated to the Democrats and the Republicans. He's a good businessman, and people have to think in those same terms. And then I guess lastly, I guess I just wanted to mention, everybody should be aware of the fact that we're operating right now under a continuing resolution that expires on March 14th. And that has major implications for a small business. Essentially, a continuing resolution is a legislative measure that Congress uses to continue the funding levels of the previous year. And what that means, though, is that funding levels stay the same and that there are no new projects. So if you're going in as a small business with a novel project, they cannot by law fund you, at least not until a new budget is released. And so that sort of halt will delay all the proposals you've submitted and make conversations a little more challenging. And then the second thing to appreciate is that let's assume the moons align, and it looks like they're going to, that Congress passes a budget in March and it's signed into law. And then the machine starts running again full steam. And I apologize for the analogy, but it's a bit like as I say to my daughter, a choo-choo train, where there is this chain reaction that causes the funding cycle to slow down, and it just backs up on itself. Research and development isn't the number one priority for any of these organizations. It's keeping the lights on, keeping people employed, paying benefits. And so R&D sort of moves itself to the bottom. So, if you applied to an SBIR, for example, and, we're operating under a CR, you might be lucky if you see notification within 2 months of the CR being lifted, and you might be lucky if we contract this fiscal year.
Right.
And those are sort of the hard truths, but those are what you have to go into those, eyes open, because otherwise, if you're reliant strictly on a, direct to phase 2 SBIR for $1.5 million to keep your lights on, you better start thinking about an alternative path.
Right. And I think these are all amazing points that you've made. I think, I laugh about it a lot because we know within the industry that the motto is hurry up and slow down. Nothing happens fast in the federal government. And a lot of it was done on purpose so that there's not, the wasteful time or funding being spent on things that aren't going to get us through to the other side. But also the fact that we do have the branches of the federal government that have to work together in agreement in order for things to get through. And so if you're not spending time speaking to the legislators in your area and really understanding what they are working on now and how you might be able to infiltrate that in one way or another, then you have no idea. You're just out in the wind. And that's why we tell people all the time, working with the federal government is nothing like working in the commercial market. There are so many avenues that are different that there is no foundation that you've built in a commercial market to translate into the federal marketplace. And this right here is a perfect example of that because there's so many levels of understanding there and a lot of things that you may not be able to lobby on your own behalf, right? That's why lobbyists exist, because they have relationships that they can go in and use on your behalf. And so it isn't just being the loudest voice in the room, or it isn't just being the smartest person in the room or having the best capabilities for a specific mission. But if you're really trying to break into it, there's a lot of different pathways that have to be led. That's why organizations that I work with within the federal contracting community, they all have lobbyists. They all have people that are advocating on their behalf so that they have a seat at the table with the right people, because obviously you're still at the same spot if you're lobbying to someone that can't do anything to help you. So really being able to build relationships in the right places and having people advocate on your behalf, because there are other people, it's very rarely that you'll see something coming out that nobody else in the world can do or nobody else in the United States can do. There is a definite benefit in numbers. And so maybe getting involved in communities that already have a lobbying effort that you can join in on, the unified voices tend to go a little bit further. And so I love that you've pinpointed so much. We brought it up as a federal budget topic, but it leads into a lot of that advocacy perspective as well. So that's why it's so important that people kind of find those ecosystems that they can feel supported within to help them with aspects of this concept that they are not knowledgeable about, because you can't do everything on your own. And I think it's important for people to recognize that for more reasons than one. So great explanation on that portion of this conversation. I think you really hit the nail on the head on every single aspect that you brought to light there. As we're closing up, I wanted to talk about, you wrote this book, you've got so much past experience. And I know it's going to be hard to narrow it into just one, but what is one of the most impactful things that you experienced that led you to write this book? Like I said, I'm going to say it again, go to Amazon, look it up, take a glimpse at it. I think it's definitely worth the buy, but given your experience in the federal government, both inside and outside, from industry side and government side, what are some of the impactful things that happened that made you want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, foremost, it was going through an acquisition. I think we as salespeople have to be honest with our role within any small business and know that it is always our head on the chopping block first and foremost. It's not the tech staff, it's not the founders, it's us. And so when we started, listening to potential suitors, my antenna was going up like, oh, I need to be thinking about, an exit strategy. And my boss, thankfully, was absolutely wonderful. I mean, she broached the subject with me before I needed to, great EQ. And, basically said, Rob, I'm going to take care of you. Don't worry. And so the immediate response to that was, I need to figure out a way to take care of her. And so it was, all right, if we're going to go through this whole thing again as founders and another thing, what do we need to know? And so it started off as like 20 points of light from Uncle Rob. And that then just continued to just go, and more pages stacked up. And honestly, it became this like, I don't know, this passion to prevent people from being stymied by foundational knowledge. That like, it should not be a blocker that you're not aware of SAM.gov. It shouldn't be a blocker that you don't have a DD2345 or a DD24, whatever the forms are. There's like a million of them. The point is that like that knowledge is out there, but it's distributed, so many different pockets that finding it in one place was, a Herculean effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so my hope was to allow companies to sort of jump to the good part and not have to spend years developing this knowledge, just having it in a quick reference guide, and then, doing the deeper knowledge research into the things that they care about. If you're never going to go into the classified realm, great, skip that part. Focus on the things that do matter to you, and, save yourself that time and money.
Those are all wonderful and amazing reasons that I am happy that we've been able to share this book with our audience, because I think it's a very valuable tool, spoken truly from someone who understands. And so if you're looking for a resource that can help you break it down and not do it in the way that the FAR does, right? My CEO jokes all the time that the FAR is not measured in number of pages, but in weight. So I think I literally and figuratively to that point. So it's wonderful to have resources like this that can break things down for people. And so I certainly appreciate you coming on to the show today. I would love to have you back. I definitely am going to keep in contact. I've been making notes as you've been talking. There are some things that I think would be internal to us at Parabolas, very beneficial to be able to chat with you about. And so having you on the program again would be a great privilege to us, but thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Teresa. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. We appreciate having all of you listen in today as well. We encourage you to go on Amazon and purchase the book, Startup Statesmanship. You will not be disappointed. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our YouTube channel by the same name. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.